Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation. We're having a community conversation slash author talk this morning. My name is Susan Barber, and I am so fortunate to be able to curate conversations like this for the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation. Um, Please, if you are willing or able, just in the chat, put in where you're zooming in from. I'm always amazed at how many people join us from all over the country and often from other parts of the world. And today I have the great pleasure of speaking with my friend, former colleague, and a person that facilitates for a program that I'm also involved with, Gabby Jimenez. And I cannot wait for this conversation to start. Before the conversation starts, though, just a couple of sort of housekeeping things. I'm going to introduce the foundation and I'm going to introduce Gabby very briefly and just to say a little bit about this today and how things are going to go. So for those of you that are unfamiliar, the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation is a 50c3 nonprofit organization that's been inspired by the life and work of Elisabeth, who was a psychiatrist, humanitarian, and a hospice pioneer. Elisabeth is often described as the death and dying lady. I had the great good fortune to meet Elisabeth in the last years of her life, and I will tell you, she was more alive than most people I've ever met in my life. She loved life, and she really hoped that her work, the work that she did, would help people to understand that having a relationship with death long before you are diagnosed with a terminal illness will help people to live their life to its fullest, understanding that this is time-limited experience that we're engaged in, and living our life to the fullest was one of Elisabeth's goals, and she certainly lived her life to the fullest. In the spirit of embracing all of life, which includes death, the foundation furthers her mission and vision through the work that is essential to her, and she held a deeply held belief that unconditional love is the most healing medicine of all, and in that spirit, we offer this class. The foundation is involved around the world through chapters that support people from physicians learning about palliative care, being trained in East Timor, in Chile, in Central and South America. There's a huge support for this work and for Elisabeth's foundation. Ken Ross, who is her son and manages the foundation, is himself today in Chile because he's giving us a talk at a conference tomorrow. So in that spirit, we welcome all of you and hope that this event this morning is useful and helpful to all of you. I'd also like to just briefly introduce Gabby, who I had the incredible pleasure of working with. Gabby is a hospice nurse, a death doula, and a death educator. And I first met Gabby at Mission Hospice, where we were working. I think in 2015, Gabby, is when I first met you. And since that time, Gabby and I are both exploring other career opportunities. I am currently working with the Humane Prison Hospice Project, and Gabby is one of our beloved facilitators that goes into prison settings in California to work with incarcerated people so that they can support their peers who are experiencing dementia, memory loss, palliative care needs, death, dying, loss, and grief. And Gabby is one of our most wonderful facilitators. And I think on that note, Gabby, I would just like to say a couple of things about today. Gabby, when we talk about how we're going to do these, they're always different. And Gabby today is going to talk about her grief journey, using her books as sort of touchstones along the journey she's been on herself, both professionally and of course personally. And so if you have a question, if you, like me, cannot remember things, like if I have a question, I have to wait an hour to ask it, I will never remember that question. So I would encourage people, if there's something that's coming up for them, to please just stick it up in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat. I'll write down the times that that the question is put up there. And then when there's time for questions, which will be at about 11 o'clock Pacific time. We'll open up the room if people want to raise their Zoom hands and ask, please do that. And, or I will just ask the questions from what's in the chat. So welcome to all of you. If you've just joined us, please do put up in the chat where it is you're Zooming in from. And Gabby, why don't you, I'm going to turn this over to you now.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. I am so nervous. I have done this so many times and still my stomach gets all knotty and I start to sweat and thank goodness I'm wearing pajamas from the waist down because I can be comfortable. I don't know why I get so nervous. I think sometimes I'm worried that is what I'm going to say valuable enough? Is it going to resonate? Is it going to mean something? Did an interview a couple years ago, and the question they asked was, "How did you recover from imposter syndrome?" And I thought about that for a minute, and I thought, "Gosh, are you supposed to recover from that?" Because I go through imposter syndrome every time I speak. And I said, I've never gotten through that. I always feel, not that I'm an imposter, because I do feel like I come to you with my experience and my shared compassion for the work that I do, but I do question sometimes. And I realize that actually, I think I want to always have the nerves, always have that little bit of imposter syndrome, because it means I'm not coming to you with ego. When you do this work, you have to you have to be human and feel things and know that you do not know it all. And while I am an educator and I share my stories and my experience, I learn something every single day. And so, yeah, I'm nervous. I'll be straight up with you. I am nervous, but that'll fade because once I get into my thing, I'm like, yeah, I got this. So just bear with me. Susan lovingly invited me, Susan and the Kübler-Ross Foundation, invited me to speak about my recent book, which is called It Never Gets Easier to Say Goodbye. Now, if you get a copy, it won't have post-its, just so you know. And she wanted to promote it, which she's always been super supportive of me. And what I asked was, instead of doing a book promotion just about my book, although I hope you all run out and get one or two or 10, what I really wanted to do was share why I wrote them and what I learned when I wrote them and how they resonate with me, hoping that maybe something I've learned on my own grief journey can help you. So today I'm going to talk about It Never Gets Easier to Say Goodbye, which is a book of poetry. And it's poetry that I have been writing for about, I would say about 5 or 6 years. I started writing it when I started having my own reaction to other people's grief. Because as I start working with someone, right, I meet them on their journey. And once a diagnosis hits, right, once they're faced with that, that's when anticipatory grief begins. So I witnessed that. Now, keep in mind, I've been with over 2,500 people who are at different stages of the dying process, which means I've probably witnessed about 1,000, maybe more last breaths, which means I've seen and watched and been present for twice that many people who have had to say goodbye. Some were prepared, some were shocked, some were prepared but still became shocked. But I've witnessed so much grief. And so I wrote the book of poems kind of along my journey because I wanted to write about what I witnessed. And then 3 years ago, my brother died. And I realized that despite how much I know, I I didn't know. And I didn't know what to do for myself. So I wrote Healing a Grieving Heart. So today I'm going to read to you from several pages from there. I'm going to share my journey. I'm going to talk about what I have learned about grief and grieving for yourself and for the people you love. How we can show up for other people, how we can show up for ourselves, how we can honor the myriad of emotions that we experience from grief. Excuse me. That's the nerves. So, first, I'm going to tell you about my own grief. Both my parents died before they were 50, 55-ish, so they died a long time ago. My son's father died. My sister died. My brother just died 3 years ago. Many friends have died. I lost a baby. I have lost so many friends. And I didn't deal with any of it because most of you know we're taught to tuck that stuff down. How dare we show an emotion that might have a reaction from someone else? How dare we say how sad we are and expect others to understand? We're supposed to shove it down. That is so unhealthy. Of course, we're not taught that, right? So until I was sitting at my brother's bedside, did I ever really face my own grief. So before I go on, I looked up some words that we use a lot. And I want to read these definitions and kind of give you my interpretation of them. One is the word we hear often is healing. Even in my book, Healing a Grieving Heart, I wrote that because I learned what it meant to heal my own heart. But I looked up the word healing. It is the process of making or becoming sound or healthy again. The true meaning of healing encompasses a holistic process of restoration and recovery, encompassing physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well being, aiming for wholeness and a sense of meaning and purpose. I really liked that. That helped me to understand a little bit more about healing. While grief is the natural and adaptive process of adjusting to loss, healing is the journey towards, and I'm going to say this part twice, finding a sense of peace, restoration, and resilience. Finding a sense of peace, restoration, and resilience. I like that a lot. For me, healing means finally being able to walk alongside your grief, to not walk 50 feet in front of it, or 50 feet behind it, hoping that it keeps up or that you keep up, right? It's walking alongside it. So I wrote this a while ago. If you follow me on the hospice part, you've probably seen this before, but I'm going to read it to you because this is what it means to me. Sometimes I think of grief as a stranger knocking at my door, and I still let it in. Sometimes it's like an old friend has its own key and lets itself in. Sometimes I stand at the door and whisper, "Go away." Sometimes I open the door, I step aside, and I say, "Come on in." You're going to anyway. Grief doesn't go away. It's with us all the time. Sometimes I think it's where we're at that moment that determines our reaction to it. Because sometimes we're like, "Oh, come on over here. You're like my BFF now. We can hang out. We're good at this." And other times I'm like, "Wait, I can't deal with you right now." So it's so different, right? All the time, but it's always there. I then looked up the word peace. I always I always use that in my teaching. I'll say things like, "We need to make peace with that," or "I'm at peace with it." What does that mean? I know what it means for me, but do people understand it when I say it? And do they mean the same thing I do when they say it? I mean, we can't be sure of that. But I looked up the word peace. In the context of grief, peace doesn't mean the absence of sadness or forgetting the loss, but rather a state of acceptance, inner calm, and a sense of moving forward while honoring the memory of the deceased. And then I added to this, peace does not mean forgetting. Acceptance does not make it okay. Moving forward simply means finding a way to live with the loss, to live with the sadness, and to find a way to integrate it into your everyday life. Okay, then I made up something. It turns out I didn't, but just work with me here. I thought I made this up. Pancake grief. So I'm sitting at my brother's bedside. I was in the ICU with him for 18 days. A little pre-story is that my brother and I had not talked in 6 years, maybe. We had a big fight, which in all fairness, he started, but I allowed it to take a life of its own, right? I accepted the distance. I stopped trying. I I didn't try harder. I just let it be. I accepted it for what it was. And then I found myself at his bedside. I was in California. I got the call that he was rushed to the hospital. He was in respiratory distress, excuse me. And what did I do? I packed everything up. I called into work. I did what I needed to do, and I flew to his bedside because that's what you do, right? And I sat at his bedside and I was wearing two hats, the sister hat and the nurse hat. And in between that is sort of the grief experience hat because gosh, I've been with so many people who had died and were grieving and all of that that I just know everything. No, I don't. I do not know everything. And I'm very aware of that. But especially during that time was I aware of how fragile I am too. And when my brother died, it was like all of the grief that I've ever experienced, all those losses I told you about, my parents, a baby, my son's father, my friends, my sister, all of that rose to the surface. And I called it pancake grief. And this is my explanation of that. You have a plate. We're all given a plate when we're born, when we start this life. And the plate we add stuff to it, right, as we go along. Maybe as kids, we add a pet death or our grandparents, sometimes a parent, sometimes a sibling, sometimes a classmate. And these deaths are added to the plate as we get older. And it gets taller. Of course, as we get older, we experience so much loss. And just for the record, in my opinion, is that pet death is equally as heartbreaking. So that's heavy loss too. So I've got all of my pancakes stacking up. And when my brother died, all of the pancakes toppled over. It was like the weight of his pancake was heavier than all the rest. They all came tumbling down and it was messy. There's syrup and butter everywhere, and the pancakes are crumbling and they're falling all over the table, and it was messy. And I had to clean it up. How can I deal with this loss when I hadn't dealt with any of those? But I didn't know it. And I didn't even know how to start. So I didn't know what to do. And it's taken me 3 years and I'm only touching it now. So what I did was I started writing Healing a Grieving Heart because I wanted to work through everything I was feeling. You know, there's so much. First of all, you have to navigate the relationship you had with this person. Good or bad, there's stuff, right? And then there's the realization that you wasted time, because that's how I took it. I wasted time being angry and distant. Then there's regret and anger and guilt. And sometimes you feel like you're the only person in the whole world that has ever felt this kind of pain. And then you feel selfish because you think your pain is worse than others, and how dare you do that? I mean, it is messy. Grief is messy. So I was gone about a month from work after I was with my brother for those 18 days, and then I took some more time off to work through my grief. On my very first day back, and I am a hospice nurse. I've moved from hospice to pediatric palliative care, which by the way, I love. But so I've got a lot of hospice and palliative care experience. And at this time, I was a hospice nurse. And I went back to work, my first day back. I walk into a room, and there's this young guy sleeping in this bed, or pretty much non-responsive and sedated and dying. He was about my brother's age. He was 57. And I looked at him and I knew he was close. And keep in mind, this is my first patient back after being with my brother who died. This woman is sitting next to the bed, and she's sad and she's crying, and she looks up at me and she says, "How do I say goodbye to my brother?" And I thought to myself, really? That's the patient you're going to give me on my first day back? But that was a really important patient to have, because in my heart, I knew I can do this. I know what it feels like to say goodbye to your brother. I just did it. But when you work in this field, you can't make what they're going through about you. I have learned early on, and even more so now, that I can't go up to them and say, "Oh, my brother just died. I've got this. I know what you're going through." I do not know what they're going through. We never compare our grief to someone else's, no matter how many losses you have. And what I realized at that moment was that my brother was with me. I'm going to learn from this grief. I'm going to carry him with me and have him help me to honor others who are grieving. And this might sound weird to you or strange or a little woo-woo, but he was so with me when I sat down on the chair next to her. And I said, I think I can help you with this. And I didn't say my brother just died or I've lost siblings or I know how you feel, because as you know, we don't say that. But what I did say was, you tell him how you feel. When my brother was dying, every single day, I told him how sorry I was. I told him I was sorry for wasting time, that I didn't try harder, that I didn't make more of an effort to fix things. I hoped he accepted my apologies. I accepted his unsaid apology. I forgave him. I hoped he forgave me. And I did this every day. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And I even said, when you get better, Ben, we're gonna do better. We're going to forget all of this, right? Because that's what we want to do when we're sitting at the bedside of someone who's dying. It's just, we want a little more time. We always want more time. I want another chance to fix things, but we can't fix things. So I just kept saying, I'm sorry. And on the day before he died, he woke up and they took him off the ventilator, they took him off the oxygen, and he woke up and he even had a bite of applesauce. And I said, Ben, did you hear me? Did you know I was there? And he said, I'm sorry too. I needed that so bad. And I also know that he took that with him too. He took all my words with him. So all these years of working in hospice, when I've said to people, talk to them, they hear you, I believed that with every ounce of my being. But now it's been elevated in a way that I can gift someone the trust in those words. So, you know what I did when I sat down next to that girl? I said, first of all, you're not alone. I've got you. I'm going to sit right here with you. And I said, and here's my advice. Tell him everything you feel. You don't have to be stoic and strong. You don't have to hold back your tears. Say everything you want him to know. Everything. Because I guarantee you he's going to take it with him. And that's one of the most beautiful lessons that I learned from my brother dying, was the reassurance that what I'm doing when I support others is real. It's true. They hear you. Boy, imagine all the people that you've said goodbye to, that you said one last word to. Even it was just, I love you, or thank you, or I'll miss you, or share memories. They took that with them. That means everything to me. Now I'm going to read a little bit from my book. On page 13, there's a part that says, what does it feel like? What does grief feel like? But I'm only going to read you a portion of it. Grief takes time. Grief is a process. Grief is all the feels, all the time, wrapped tightly around all the love you've ever felt. Grief is baby steps. Grief is the never-ending box of tissue. Grief is something we all experience, but we do it differently. So it isn't for us to tell someone else how to feel or how long they will or should feel it. Just let them know they are not alone and to feel whatever they need to feel. Grief never goes away, just like our love for them. I will never say I loved him, because I don't put a D at the end of love. I love him and I always will. And how dare you to come to me and tell me that there is a D at the end of love? I'm going to love him. I'm going to love my mom, my dad, my sister, my son's father, my unborn baby, my best friends. There is no D at the end of love when someone dies. We love them, and we always will. And it takes time. Another question is, how are you doing? We get that a lot. Well, how do you think I'm doing, right? There's this place inside you that wants to be sarcastic when someone asks you that question and say, how do you think I'm doing? My brother just died. But we don't. We answer in a way that makes other people feel more comfortable about our grief. Why do we do that? Why can't we say, I'm having a really bad day? Most people will say that they are fine. I'm fine. I'm doing okay. Well, do you need anything? Oh, no, I don't need anything at all. Most people do not want to burden, for lack of a better word, with you how they're feeling. They don't want to burden you with those feelings. So they keep it all in. Some people feel compelled to keep their feelings private because of the reaction they know they will elicit from others. I'm going to read again from my book. I'm going to do this a lot, so just bear with me. This is a poem called Grief Changes from Day to Day. If you asked me how I was doing, I'll tell you what I would say. Grief is really messy and it changes from day to day. Some days I'm wearing a coat with many pockets. Each one is filled with mud. And sometimes it feels like I'm drowning in a pouring rain-caused flood. Some days I feel all tangled up, unable to break free. It feels like my it feels like my sadness is suffocating me. Some days I do see sunshine amidst the pouring rain, and it has this gentle, loving way of softening my pain. Those days are few and far between. They might never happen again. So I take each good day one at a time and truly savor them. If you ask me how I'm doing, I'll tell you what I'd say. I'm doing the very best I can with all the changes grief brings my way. I'm doing the best I can. But I'm not going to hide how I feel so that other people feel better about my grief. I'm going to be honest with it because what I realize is that I need help. I mean, I'm not going to harm myself or others. I'm not sitting here drinking all day. I'm not sleeping too much, but I'm sad. And I'm okay with that because the reason I'm sad is because someone I love, even during the difficult times, has died. And as I get older, it feels like the number of deaths I'm experiencing are increasing, right? Because we get to that age where suddenly everybody I know, and it's not other people's parents anymore. It's my peers. It's people of my age. I just turned 61 2 days ago. 61. When I was in my 20s, 61 was dead. I mean, like you're dead at 61. Neither of my parents made it to 60. My brother and sister didn't make it to 60. So, gosh, that means something really amazing must be waiting for me because I was gifted more time. And and then you have a little bit of survivor's guilt. Why am I living longer than the others, right? Why did I get chosen to have more time? Well, there must be a reason. I'm not going to overanalyze it because that's just messy too. So I'm just going to be with it and do the very best with what I've got, which is right now. One of the other things that I have experienced, and I think this happens mostly with married couples who have lost their partner, but I experienced it as well, excuse me, which is identity theft. Not the kind where people steal your credit cards. It's your personal identity, who you are when you were with that person and who you are now that they're gone. I wrote a part in here called Identity Theft, and I'm just going to read a little bit from it. When someone you love dies, your life changes in a million different ways. Everything you plan to do won't happen. The you that you were with them will change so much you won't know who you are anymore. Death and grief feel much like identity theft, stealing the person you were, leaving you feeling completely helpless, not knowing who you will be or how you will get there. When you've been with someone for how many ever years, whether it's a family member, a friend, or a partner, life without them changes you. and you have to learn this whole new way of life. And identity theft to me means that the you once were is no longer. And how do I move forward with this new way of being? And it's silly things, but meaningful. When my brother was alive, even though we weren't talking, on holidays and my birthday, he would always send me a message. Merry Christmas, Sister. He called me Sister with two E's. And on my birthday, happy birthday, Sister. And even though he's now been gone for 3 years, and my birthday was just the other day, I actually waited for a text from him because you're used to that. And now I have to be used to not that. It's it's really hard. As I am navigating my own grief journey and trying to figure out how to do this and how to care for myself, I'm realizing that I have an emotional response to navigating loss and grief, but especially relative to my work. I see death every single day. Less now doing the work that I'm doing, but as a hospice nurse, every day was death. So there's this page in my book, The Emotional Response to Navigating Loss and Grief, theirs and mine. I'm not going to read you the whole thing. I'm just going to read you 2 paragraphs that really resonate with me. I cannot reason with why some make me cry and some don't. There are not enough consistencies for me to be able to say why some I sob for and others don't even draw a single tear. I try very hard to keep it together. I certainly do not throw myself over the bed and cry hysterically. I don't recommend that. But sometimes I just let the tears fall without worry that someone might see because I am comfortable with them knowing that I feel their loss deeply. Sometimes my reaction is not about them or their loss, but instead my own personal losses, which come back again and again for me. I did not have a close relationship to my parents, and when they both died, which I was there for, I felt nothing, just numb and empty. These are feelings no one should ever have to feel or carry with them for the rest of their lives, as this can be very heavy. Working in end of life care brings these feelings to the surface often. When I'm in the room with a daughter who is about to say goodbye to their parent, and I hear the stories of their lives together and their relationships were most often strong, I cry a little inside each time. And every time the last breath is taken, I'm reminded that I did not have that kind of relationship with my parents, and I did not feel that way when they died. And I wish so badly that I had. This gets put on replay often for me, something I know that will never go away. When you work in this field, there's so many triggers when you're trying to navigate your own loss. But it's not just the work I do, it's life in general. Someone you know, a person at work, a friend, a neighbor has just experienced a death, and their reaction will trigger you. Sometimes you won't have much of a reaction. Sometimes you'll, and I'm going to admittedly share this with you, I am envious when I see children, adult children, saying goodbye to their parents with so much love in their heart. I wish I had that. But at time, and the blessing in time is that it softens the ache and the anger and the regret and the guilt. And so now I'm happy that they had that. And I know in my heart that it's okay. I'm okay. I had them for as long as I did, and maybe it wasn't great, but I'm here now, and they've taught me a few things, and these are things that make me stronger, and I've made peace with that, using that great word, peace. It's life. Life has triggers. And it's the weird things too, right? It's not even the normal stuff like someone talking about death. It could be a song that you hear on the radio. It could be the smell of cigar smoke, or in my case, my dad was a cabinet maker and I spent hours and hours in his wood shop. Anytime I smell sawdust. And keep in mind, I hated sitting in his shop for hours until it was time to go home. I hated it. I hated it. I was such a grumpy child. Most teenagers are. But I thought that was the worst thing ever. I would give anything to sit in his wood shop now. That's what time does. I'm grateful for time. We talked about this, about making someone else's grief about you. It's easy for us to say, I know how you're feeling. We don't. We don't know. And as I'm sharing my stories, I watch all of you as you nod your head because you get it. You're taking something I might say and think, yeah, that makes sense to me. And that's how I feel when I'll hear someone talk and I'll think, yes, that resonates with me. That makes sense to me. I do feel your sadness, but I am not your sadness. I am the person that's right here with you saying, you got this and I've got you, and you're not doing this alone, but you're going to do this your way, and I'm going to support that. Because that's how we support others who are grieving. We don't make it about us. We don't tell them how to feel or how to process this or how to go through that, because that's not our role. Our role is to show up and be there in the way that they need. It's hard to talk to grievers sometimes without putting in your own 2 cents, right? Or 10 cents. But it's important to talk to them. I'm going to read from page 26. It's the it's called Conversations with Grievers, but I'm just going to read this little paragraph. Sometimes I wonder if grievers wore a button on their shirt that read, "Please be gentle with me, grief in process." People would be more inclined to ask questions and check in and sit with someone who is grieving, offering them a safe place to share their stories at a time when most people have stopped asking. Imagine if you had a button on your shirt that said, "Please be gentle with me, grief in process." Would people approach you differently? Would they say, "Oh, you're grieving. Is there anything I can do to support you? Do you want to talk about it? Do you want silence? Do you want me to never bring it up again?" But what if we knew that each person we met in the grocery store or at the bookstore or getting our car fixed or whatever we do in life, at work, whatever, what if we knew based on the little label on their shirt what they were going through, would we treat them differently? Would we be more patient with them? What if we lived a life assuming that every person we come across, every path that we cross with another human being, that maybe they're going through something? What if we stepped back just a little bit, just enough to give them some space and take a deep breath and just let them be with that for a moment? But especially grievers. I think if we knew that they were grieving, we would probably be a little more understanding. I think we need to talk to them. I think we need to give them a safe space to share what they're feeling. Because if we did and they could talk about it, maybe they'd be less sad. When my brother died, I think about the first 2 weeks, everyone was checking in. I love that, right? And uh, and then after about 3 weeks, no one asked me. And I got sick after he died, and I was not feeling well. And my friend said, "Hey, how's it going?" Sent me a little message, and I actually thought she was asking about my grief, and I said, "Oh, I'm still sick. I'm finally getting a little better." And she goes, "Oh, do you have COVID?" Of course, everybody always asks that. And I said, "No, I don't have COVID. I think honestly, I think my grief has just got the best of me, and it's really wore me down because you do have a physical reaction when you are grieving." Our body tries to protect our emotional part of ourselves by carrying the weight for us. The problem is that doesn't balance out evenly. So maybe we're less emotional, but we might get sick. We might need to sleep more. We might become weak. We might become tired. We might catch a cold. So many things. But I said, "No, I think this grief has just got the best of me." And you know what her response was? "Aren't you over that by now?" Aren't I over that by now? Who says that? I mean, that's crazy, right? Like, no, I'm not over it. But I realized about that time that people were going to stop checking in because I think they think you're over it by now. And maybe from their perspective, you should be. So I wrote 3 poems for the first year anniversary, the second year anniversary, and the third year anniversary from my brother's death. And I want to read them to you. Of course, I want to read them to you because they're in my book and I want to share that with you. But it's more than that. I want you to see the different ways that I was experiencing my grief with each year. I used to run track, so I use this as an analogy all the time. I realized after the first year that grief, excuse me, let me back up. The anniversary of their death is a mile marker on the track that we are going to be going round and round and round for the rest of our life. But each time we make it to that mile marker, you will feel a sense of change, not growth, not improvement, but change. Sometimes it sits with you a little easier. Sometimes it's actually harder. I have learned that grief gets harder with time because you're anticipating that anniversary, that upcoming birthday, that holiday that you won't share with them again. But you're also, with time, you're realizing all the things that you don't get to do with them anymore, or the memories that you have that you don't get to make more. And so each track brings a different reaction for each person. So on the first anniversary of my brother's death, I wrote this poem: If I could do anything over again. If I could do anything over again, it would be to spend more time with you. But that's not how things work in this thing called life. I guess we did all that we were meant to do. But I would have reached out to you more often. I would have suggested we meet for a dinner or a drink. I would have stopped holding grudges and anger inside. I would have fought harder to keep our relationship in sync. I would have opened the door instead of leaving it closed. I would have told you I love you a little bit more. We all take for granted each hour and day. We assume we have more, and we always say, let's do it tomorrow or some other day. But there might not be a tomorrow or some other day. So let's make the most of right now. Let's do that today. As I read this, I sound like Dr. Seuss. Just work with me. I don't want to do it all over again. I don't want to lose what we had. I don't want to sit with regret in my heart. I no longer want to be sad. Instead, I will visit the place in my heart where all of our memories are stored. I will smile and I'll laugh, and I'm sure I will cry. And I will always wish there were more. I don't want to do anything over again. I don't think it would change a thing. I will make more effort to enjoy right now, not wondering what tomorrow might bring. My gratitude cup is filled to the brim of the times I did have with you, and for that I will always be thankful. I hope that you're feeling that too. So that was the first anniversary of my brother's death. On the second anniversary of the death, I wrote a poem called The Day I Said Goodbye. My heart is reminded what day this is. I don't need a calendar for that. It remembers like it was yesterday. It's the day that I first became sad. And although I feel my sadness, and it's in everything I do and say, I'm not my sadness, and it has stopped consuming my entire day. I have learned to find joy in the smallest of things. It's often my memories of you and the smiles they bring. As I cross the next mile marker on the track that is paved with grief, I've said I have good days and bad days. Some days my grief is a relief. I remember this day as the day I said goodbye. I think I'll go take a moment and have a really good cry. On the third anniversary of his death, I wrote this, which was in January. I miss you, Ben. Sorry. See, it doesn't go away, right? You get that. For me, grief has shown up in layers. Each year or layer reveals grief to me differently, in many ways contemplating past years, bringing clarity and helping me to better understand it. On this third year anniversary of his death, things feel more real. You are gone. I get that. I was there the day it happened. I watched you take your last breath. It was the same day I felt like I took mine. The first year felt like the worst pain I ever had. The second year was emotional and it was really sad. The third year comes to me with a newfound sense of reasoning, as if it is helping me to see it with more clarity. letting me know that everything I feel is very, very real. I understand now why grief takes time, why it never goes away, and most of all, why we need to go through this process. We must work through each layer. We must feel whatever we need to feel. And while we will never make peace with it, there's that word again, or accept it, I do truly believe that we get to a place where we are more prepared for it. We know it's coming, and when it arrives, we are a little less surprised. I think that's what grief is teaching me, and time is teaching me, and the anniversaries are teaching me, is that the sadness is going to stay with us because we're going to miss them forever. But time softens the surprise. We're ready for it. We know it's coming. That doesn't make it hurt less. What I've learned about grief: we do not grieve the same way. Some days are emotional. Some we won't even shed a tear. And some other things that I have learned is that, and I know this comes from a really beautiful place. I know that the meaning behind it, I respect the faith that inspires it, but I don't think they're in a better place, because the better place would be with me. So when someone says that, I want to scream out loud, no, but I do know where that comes from. I respect that. But I think we have to be really mindful how we approach grievers and what we say. And faith is a really important thing, because faith is powerful and faith is comforting. And especially for those who have a strong practice, it makes so much sense to them. But like in anything we do, our choices are ours. We should never try to fix someone else by expecting them to connect with our choices, our beliefs, whatever they might be, faith or otherwise. And so when we say things like that, we have to remember that not everybody feels the same way. It does not get better with time. It might get easier to move through each day. We might become less shocked by the things that triggers us. We might ease out of our emotional reaction to the things that trigger us a little quicker. And like I said earlier, please don't put a D at the end of love. We love them, and we always will. The D has a way of making our love for them past tense, as though the love dies when they die. How can you help a griever? Don't stop checking in. One of the things that I do is I save the date of the death in my calendar on my phone and set it for repeat every year, so that when it shows up each year, and it's easy for us to forget. We can't be expected to remember all those things. I have a hard enough time remembering birthdays. So when it pops up, I know to send a message to my friend who is grieving, whether it's the first year or the 30th year, and let them know that I remember too, because I know that they do. I send them a little red heart text message that just says, I'm thinking of you, because I want them to know that I didn't forget. And I especially know that they didn't forget. Give them permission to talk about their person. Say their name out loud so they know it's a safe place for them. Why do we feel like we aren't allowed to say their name? Right? I say Ben's name all the time. I say Laura, that's my sister, her name all the time. And my friend, who's very special to me, John, recently died. And I say John's name every day. In fact, I find reasons to say his name, especially when I put on repeat the playlist that we created together, him and his sister and I, because I love him and I always will. And just because they died shouldn't close the book on the chapter of the life that they led. I'm going to talk about them always. And I do think that we have to be mindful of the crowd that we're in. Maybe you got to step out of that crowd for a little bit. But there is someone out there that wants to hear their stories. Find them. But don't feel like you have to put a muzzle on your grief. It's not healthy. Be patient with grievers. Oh boy, they're so up and down. I actually think I wrote something once about grief being bipolar because it's so this way and this way, right? You never really know where it is, and it's a little up and down. And I mean, we're all a little bit like that anyway, but grief doesn't know what day it is. It doesn't know that it's the Super Bowl or your birthday, or it doesn't know. So it just kind of shows up. And I compare grief to one of those, you know, those when you were a kid, we used to get those boxes of like 160 crayons. And I always wondered, how did they come out with all these colors? It's amazing to me. But grief would be a perfect fit in this box of 160 crayons because you don't always know what color it's going to be. Ask about them. How are you doing? What's going on? And maybe don't ask, how are you doing? Because we know how they're doing. But hey, I know today especially, actually, my friend's husband died 2 years ago today, and it's his anniversary. And I just sent her a red heart. I'm not going to engage in long conversations if that's not what she wants, but I wanted her to know that I'm thinking about her and that I know that this day is hard. And it's an open door that says, come on in if you want. We can talk about it or not. This gets to be your choice. And even all, I said this a few times and I'll say it again and again and again, is don't stop checking in because it doesn't get better with time. It doesn't go away. Now, one of the other things that I have kind of put in some of my trainings is the reminder that flowers are a beautiful thing to send someone when someone has died. I love flowers. I'm very particular though because I don't like super strong scented flowers, but I love flowers. But imagine you get this gorgeous bouquet of flowers when someone you love has died, and you put it on the table and you pass it by each time you walk by the table, and it's gorgeous. But slowly, the petals start to wilt and brown and fall to the table. The leaves fall. Maybe they fall onto the floor. The water gets murky. And now here you're watching your flowers die. And then you just avoid them because you don't need to deal with that right now. If you want to support a griever and you're nearby, go over and clean up their flowers for them so they don't have to see that. You know, especially if I've got a household of flowers, just empty the water. And one of the things I do, this may be way out of your interest, but I do like to do this is, and I do it with my own flowers sometimes. I'm a mandala person, so I like to make mandalas. In my grief and forgiveness ritual classes, I encourage people to make mandalas as a healing modality. It really does bring comfort when you go out and search for items and then come and sit down with them and make this beautiful spiral decoration out of them. Well, one of the things that I like to do with my bouquets of flowers, and I've done it for grievers as well, is take the flowers that are from, for all intents and purposes, dying, but are still beautiful in so many ways, is I'll take them outside, maybe on the front lawn or the back patio or on a table nearby, and I will make a mandala with the beautiful flowers just to give them a little more life, a little more time. And it's a wonderful ritual. It's beautiful. You don't have to do that, but it is something that I like to do. I also wrote another poem that I think kind of, for me at least, it explains the different ways that grief affects us. Expecting turbulent waters. The boat rests quietly on the tranquil water, drifting ever so gently with each soft wave. And though it remains serene for now, it awaits the impending storm looming above, expecting turbulent waters, which will propel the boat, sometimes so swiftly it overturns. The blessing is that while we know the storms will always come, we also know that there will be calm waters again. Grief is like that, a slowly drifting boat on calm water and an overturned boat in a storm. As long as we know how to swim, we will never sink. And we do know how to swim. That's what grief feels like to me. I have a way of comparing a lot of things to the forest and the ocean. Those are my places. That's my church. And it's where I go to feel a release when I need to let go of things. And I'm a ritual person, so I need to find a way to release what I'm carrying because sometimes the weight of it all can be so heavy. And I think it's too hard to carry all of that. In my Healing a Grieving Heart book, on page 39, I actually added in there a ritual that I use, which is, it's one of my favorites and I use it all the time. And in this ritual, it's candle lighting. For me, rituals are all about candle lighting, but I do, and I'll just kind of show it to you really quick. I'm not going to go over the ritual because that would take more time, but it tells you why I started doing rituals and how they work for me. And again, it's always with candles. That works. This Sunday is my ritual and ceremony class that focuses on grief, and it's Pacific time, 10 to 12. So it's on the 13th. I am offering it to all of you for free if you would like to attend it. It's where I will do 2 rituals and do a little bit more tips and tools on managing and navigating your grief. If you'd like to attend it, you can email me at thehospiceheart@gmail.com, and it's free. So if you'd like to attend. And I'm going to read one last poem. And it's actually the first poem in my book of It Never Gets Easier to Say Goodbye, because this book of poetry is about life and love and death and grief, right? And everything in between. And this is a poem I wrote a really long time ago, but I think it's a beautiful way to finish out today. It's called Like a Butterfly. When that last breath is taken, the air in the room leaves for just a moment, leaving those in its presence holding their breath. It is at that moment when we are all reminded how truly fragile and precious life is. Life is much like a butterfly whose wings, which are delicate in nature, are powerful, miraculous, and strong. Sometimes able to make it through fierce winds, while other times no longer able to fly, feeling the wind blowing through the tiny tears in its wings, knowing the end is near. Life is like that, fierce, strong, fragile, and precious, like a butterfly. We have life, we have death, and we have grief. Every one of us has that. We are not immune to death or grief, but we have life. And if I can give you any advice at all, you may not be asking for it, but it is to savor life, to practice more kindness, to be less judgmental, to welcome one another's differences, even who they vote for. It's okay. We can be different, but we are in community. And in order to do that, we have to embrace our differences, embrace our life choices, our changes, our sadness, our anger, our love, our peace, and our healing. We have to be kinder to ourselves and to every person we walk next to, even if they've done some things we wouldn't. You know, as Susan mentioned, and I'll finish here, is, you know, she's part of the Humane Prison Hospice Project, and I'm one of the facilitators. And I go into into a prison where people have done pretty horrible things, right? But what they're doing is providing end-of-life care in the most beautiful way. I am so in awe of their compassionate hearts. When I walked in there the first day, I remember walking through the prison thinking, I was a little afraid and a little uncertain. Why am I here? Is this okay? Am I safe? When I walk through those doors now, I can't wait to get in there. Because what I realize is that while their mistakes might be different and bigger and worse than mine, I've made them too. But at the end of the day, when we're at the bedside of somebody who's dying, we're a human being. And when we're lying in that bed dying, that's a human being. And at least for me, who practices end-of-life care on a daily basis, I'm not going to pass judgment. I'm not going to try to fix you. I'm not going to one-up you with how much better I am. I'm going to meet you where you are, not where I think or want you to be, because you are a human being and you deserve that. So as we walk through the next days, weeks, months, years of our life, how much more we're gifted. Let's just be kinder. Thank you.
So much. So many things you said that just resonate so deeply. There's a question, Amy, I want to ask if you wanted to ask your question yourself. If you did, if you just want to unmute yourself, I will try to find you. I do see you unmuted. One second, I'm going to try to find you here in the, oh, there you are. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for the beautiful delivery. Um, you know, how, my question was, when you run into somebody who, maybe you've even been to a memorial for their lost one, whoever it might have been, a son, a daughter, a mother, but then you see them later, like even 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. What's another word to say instead of how are you? Because I know that's such a loaded question. And I know, like, kind of on the urgent level, when we hear about death, and somebody we know has lost someone, I always restrain from not saying, how are you? I want to say, I'm thinking of you, and Christopher, and your thoughts are with me, and maybe walk on through the grocery store. But as time goes on, I really am kind of curious, or do I just say that again?
That's such a good question. I've actually had to practice that a lot, especially with my patients, because even the patients who are dying, I'm not going to ask them how they are because I know how they are. And I don't ask grievers how they are because I know, but sometimes I might. Often in your case, if you saw someone say after the service, you can reiterate what a beautiful service it was. That was such a beautiful service. I was really honored to be there. Or run into them and say, and when you say this, it tells them it's okay to say their name. You can say, I was thinking about Christopher the other day. I'm really glad to see you. I really loved the way he did this. Or I was listening to the records Christopher gave me. Or in my friend Karen's brother John, in his case, I tell her all the time that I use his chef knife, this fancy chef knife, which he would just die if he knew I was using it on my peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But I use it every day on my peanut butter and jelly sandwich because I think of him and I love that. So I think that you could just, when you see that person, say, it's good to see you. Isn't that enough? Or I think about Christopher often. Or, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but if there's anything you want to talk about, I've got you. I'm here. I always just say it's really good to see you. I'm glad to be here. And as a hospice nurse, I have often repeated to the family members what an honor it was to be present at that time. And if you've gone to their celebration of life or if whatever, just talk about them. Be the person that lets them know that they can talk about them and say their name. That was a good question, Amy. Thank you.
Just listening to your question, Amy, and also Gabby, to you, I was reminded of a dear friend of mine whose son at 19 months just didn't wake up. He died at 19 months, perfectly healthy. The coroner could find nothing the matter with him. And of course, like you were saying, Gabby, people just circled the wagons for weeks after that, and then everybody disappeared. And I was asking, Avery would have been 18 this year, getting ready to go to school with all of our other friends' kids, and just to bring up his name and just to say, I was just thinking about that. Isn't that crazy how old he would be? And she said, nobody ever talks about him. It's just too hard for them. So I think just those kinds of things, to be able to be a person that has a story about their loved one or has a memory, like, what I was thinking the other day, like Abby said, like, whatever, that time we were having dinner and this weird thing happened, like, just my mom said after my dad died, everybody was trying to not send her memories of my father. And she said, do they think that the guy I lived with for like 37 years, like I just forgot about him because he's not in the house anymore? It's not like he's gone, so I just don't remember him. Like, that is not how grief works either. And she was always grateful when somebody would remind her of my father because she realized she wasn't alone thinking about him. Yeah. Does anybody else have a question? There's another question from, let me just see here. There was a question, Gabby, from Pranab, and he said earlier, and then he left a question. So what he said earlier is that he's been Really, he's been on a 7-year journey after his wife's death. His beloved wife died, and just reiterating that the grief is everlasting. It doesn't go away. And that he's been volunteering in palliative care and transformation of life and trying to be in places of positivity because for him, that's what's worked. And then he's asked how you heal yourself. Is it by actively engaging, like in reminiscing about memories, or like listening to music that you shared with the person who died, or the storytelling? And, I think just sort of a broad, open question about that. And then he also shared that he arranged an event at his home. He invited 9 other people he knew who had also lost a person dear to them, just so they could listen to songs that were important to them and to share their feelings, and to sing together, and just to remind people that bereavement and being together in community when people are grieving can be extraordinary.
Absolutely. I think healing, of course, has a different meaning to everyone. I think the way that you move through your grief with grace is to truly be with it and whatever it brings to you and acknowledge it. I sometimes I have to put my grief on a shelf because I don't have the bandwidth at the time that it shows up, but I don't forget that it's there. And I make time to bring it back down again when I'm ready. I've learned to move it aside if I'm in the midst of something else. But in order to honor it, I have to bring it back. But I think the best thing we can do on whatever stage we are in this grief journey is be with it and honor it and feel whatever we need to feel. For me, it's been writing it down. It took me a few years to write this poetry book, but the poems come from a place of learning and emotional kind of chaos sometimes. And the healing a grieving heart was really important to me because that was a 3-year journey, and it was what it felt like to get that call that my brother was in the ICU, what it was like to sit at his bedside day after day and to rehash our all of our lives together, because I was there when he took his first breath and I was there when he took his last, and that's a lot. And I think that writing is healthy. Poetry or books or journaling. I'm not a journaler, but I guess maybe I am, because really, if you read Healing a Grieving Heart, you're going to feel like you're reading my journey. I mean, my journal. Um, one of the biggest advice that I would give to grievers is to not stop finding joy. And if there's something you stopped doing, maybe because you were busy caring for your person and your loved one. And for me, on the day that I had gotten the call that my brother was in the hospital, I had just left the archery range. I was learning how to do archery, which I love, have all the stuff. I was going all the time. I was really enjoying it. When I got home, I put my archery bag in the corner and I sat down and I got the phone call. Well, I didn't pick that bag up for 2 years because it represented the day I got the call. And I even still have a hard time going back to it because I'm right back to that moment again. We connect our notification of an illness, an accident, a death, or whatever to whatever we might have been doing at that time. It's easy to do. Or we stop doing things that bring us joy because we're not supposed to. We're not supposed to laugh or smile or feel joy. But I disagree. I think joy is a very healthy thing to feel every day, even if it's just stepping out on your doorstep and breathing in fresh air and looking at those amazing clouds. We have to find joy in each day, even in the smallest of ways, because joy it gives us energy. It helps our body.
You're talking about joy. I think that just, I remember being in the hospital with like sort of my beloved, my soulmate guy, and he was dying of AIDS in the early 90s when it was a horrible time to die of AIDS. And I remember like we would just laugh so hard that the staff would come into the room sometimes and just eat their lunch like on the empty bed next to his bed and be like, this is kind of crazy what's going on here. And at least you guys can see how absurd it is. But we just like that part of our relationship. Like I remember him saying to me one day, I don't know, this might be the wrong way to do this because I just think maybe we should be like, I'm not saying we didn't talk about everything, but he said, I don't know, like we're laughing so much, maybe we should just be like different. And I said, oh, trust me on this, there'll be plenty of time for it to be different. But right now, in this moment, there's bizarre and funny things happening, and that we can still see that and not just see everything through the lens of like disaster and horrible pain and spiritual suffering. But I think too, there's a part of like, I remember after his death, my real reluctance to feel joy again, because I felt like feeling joy took me further away from my grief, which the grief felt like the thing that connected me most to him.
Mm.
And one of the things that was really quite an extraordinary learning was that the grief is a really powerful thing, but it's a connection to myself and my loss. And it's all of the beautiful memories and the things that we did together and the life that we engaged in. Like that's the part where like the connection really is. And I've heard that so many times, like, I don't want to feel better because then I'll lose my connection to so and so. And I wonder if you've heard that or if there's anything that you have to say about that.
I love what you shared. As you were talking, I was thinking before John died, him and his sister Karen and I helped him create a playlist of all his favorite songs. It's something that I like to do with people who are dying because have you ever noticed that when someone's in the bed, maybe you've been in that bed and you've been sick or whatever, and people come in and they play their music? And sometimes it's spa music. I don't want to die to spa music. I want to die to Grateful Dead or James Taylor or even Metallica sometimes. My playlist is all over the place. And my mom used to work for Joan Baez, and my dad followed the Grateful Dead around. So music to me is a diary of my life. I want to hear what I want to hear. And I wasn't at John's bedside when he died, but Karen was. And she told me that when he was dying, just moments before he took his last breath, he was tapping his foot to his favorite songs. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And he also, there was moments where he had laughter and he felt joy and gratitude. So I think that, like how you were sharing the laughter and the funny, I think there's nothing wrong with that because that gets to be our takeaway and it gets to be theirs. And the best and kindest thing we could do, and I talk about this a lot, is to have a conversation with someone who is dying and ask them what they want. I don't want, this music on. I do want this music on. I want silence. Maybe I don't want a candle wafting through the room. Like, why does everyone put their smells or their music or their wishes onto someone else? Let's write it down. Let's talk about it. I have a whole plan and it includes joy and it includes laughter and it includes storytelling and memories. And so, I've seen people laughing hysterically moments before they die. And it's not about dying, it's about living and life.
I remember my dad dying, and he was 67. He did not believe death would ever happen to anybody, but especially to him. And so, in the last weeks of his death, despite my parents and I, also Gabby, we did not like. The only thing we had in common is that I lived in their house for many years. I feel like that was a true story. And so, but when he was dying, they were living in a different house, and they said, "Don't come." But my mother, I could also tell, was really suffering, and I felt like, I'd been doing some death and dying work for some time. I went, and my father was so funny. Like people, I think somebody offered him a bunch of like tapes. That's maybe how this was in the 90s to listen to. And it was like ocean sounds because we grew up near the beach. And it was like sounds of the forest and then birds. And I remember him saying, like, we always had this thing, like my father hated everything like equally. But in his death, he hated like No bird sounds, no bird sounds. He would not acknowledge he was dying except to say, I'm not dying to a bunch of birds, so I just was like, and the poor priest that gave it to him was just like appalled. Like he was just like, there's this expectation that people in that will just be so grateful that anybody's doing anything for them. But I think like this person-centered care that we talk about, like in hospice and specifically, is to who is this person that's here? Like, what is it that they want? On my playlist, I want them blasting Born to Run as I'm making my exit. That's the top of my playlist. And just who is the person here and how do we support them? And it's often really different than what we would want.
And it should be different. And someone may want birds. So I think we have to be clear about that.
If anybody would like to maybe share a story or share something that resonated with them, something that surprised them that Gabby said. And if you want to do that, at the bottom of the Zoom screen, for some places, there's a hand. You can just click on that. Or if you want to just unmute and give me a moment so I can acknowledge that, I will call. If people are unmuting, I'll just, in the order that you unmute, I'll just say your name. Or Gabby, perhaps you have talked about everything possible and everybody is here comfortable with their grief. I'd just be
Well, I
curious
hope
if
that
anybody wants to share a story. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm hoping that, I want you all to know that I spent a lot of time working on what I shared today. And
Yeah.
while I'm always promoting my books, it wasn't about that. It was really promoting my journey, hoping that something that I said resonated with you. And remember, I am not a social worker. I am not a therapist. That is not my profession, but I am a griever and I support grievers in many different ways. And I have learned things that work for me and have worked for others. And I hope that something I shared today sat with you in a way that was comforting. Just remember that we all do this differently. And the only time there's a wrong way to do this is if you're hurting yourself. And we have to be careful of that. And that includes ourself physically as well as emotionally or spiritually. I think we have to make sure that we practice the kind of self-care that doesn't let us fall apart, even on the hardest of days. So if you wanted to make a comment about how today worked for you or felt for you, that would be wonderful too.
I'm a griever. I support grievers is one of the comments. And Gabby, another one was, oops, let me go back there. I told Gabby she did not need to worry about the chat, that I would be taking care of that. So thank you for sharing your experience and just being so authentic and being who you are. That is so powerful. And Michelle is saying that it was great and validated a lot of what she felt during her grief process. She's looking forward to getting the book and to thank you. And
Well, I
another
think,
is, yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
Well, I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say I can read you one last poem, the last poem of the book. It's the last one I wrote.
Here's a couple more comments and then let's do
Okay.
that. Maybe that would sounds like a beautiful way to end today. Um, such a beautiful time here. I sit with suicide loss survivors as well as my own loss of my only child. It felt really good to be here. It felt great to be here. Thank you. Um, and a reminder to people that right after tax day in the United States, we have National Healthcare Decisions Day. It's important to let our loved ones know what we want and especially what we do not want at the end of our life. That includes where we want to be, what the space will look like Gabby was saying, what sounds, what smells, who we want there, who we don't want there. So that you don't leave others that love you in the position of having to guess that. And for all of you out there that have had to guess that because your spouse, like my father, was raised in a certain time and in a certain way where you did not talk about feelings or vulnerability, especially if you were a man, and everybody had to guess all the time what you wanted. It was like, Gabby, it was like trying to hit a moving archery target and you almost never, it almost just never landed. So letting people know, I've always said after our experience with my father's death, where my brothers had very different ideas, and they actually had an advance directive, which was shocked us. That was locked in a safe in their basement that they had never looked at after they wrote it. So when we brought it out, it said exactly what my father did not want. So making those wishes known to each other, that's a beautiful gift to give to your family. Others are
I
saying, go
I,
ahead.
I I just want to let you all know, I offer this class. It's called Your End of Life Wishes. It's a 7-week class and the next one starts in May. And each week I give an assignment that helps you to create your own end of life plan on your terms. So if that's something you're interested in, you can find that on my website. And when Susan sends out the recording, she will include the website. But if you want to write it down now, it's www.thehospiceheart.net. But that class would be really good if you want some assistance with making those plans.
I'm going to post that up here. Just so many thanks for creating such a beautiful and meaningful space. Gabby, with the Hospice Heart, I'm going to put up the www.hospice.
www.thehospiceheart.net. And
Okay,
I
I'm going
saw
to
that
put,
someone asked the email as well,
yeah, that's what I want to put up next. So we'll do the Hospice Heart.
thehospiceheart@gmail.com.
Okay.
And if you want to attend the class on Sunday, send me an email and I will send you the Zoom link on Friday.
Wonderful. And I just a reminder that this has been recorded. And so for those of you that couldn't get here right on time, you'll have the recording. Ken Ross takes these recordings and he'll put them up on the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross YouTube channel. And everybody who's registered will get a link to that. Ken, as I said, is in Chile. It's quite likely he won't get to this probably until he's back this weekend, but do take a look at it. And go to Gabby's website, email her. She will take care of making sure that you have the information you need. And for some reason, if you don't get her all of the communication that you've gotten about this event, my email is on there. It's samb_40@yahoo.com. And you're welcome to email me and I will send a message to Gabby and connect the two of you. So thank
I
you.
think I'll finish with the poem. Is that okay?
Yes. Yeah, please do.
All right. So I wrote my book, It Never Gets Easier to Say Goodbye, and I published it on March 11th, which was my friend John's birthday. I published it on that day specifically because of him. And then he died on March 19th. And I wrote a poem for him when he died, and I have since added that to the book. It's called Your Smile. When I picture your face, I see your smile. It was what you greeted me with every time I had the honor of spending time with you. Saying goodbye to you was so hard, something I wish I never had to do. But it was in that moment where I also got to say how much I truly love you. I said it all along. There was never a time you didn't know. I have no regrets. There's nothing left unsaid. And while I wish we had more time, I'm thankful for the time we had. You are in my heart forever. It is where you will always be. And when I close my eyes, the only thing that I will see is your beautiful smile staring back at me. I always loved your smile, especially the way you smiled at me. Thank you so much for being here today, everyone. You have no idea. It means everything to me and to Susan. And I think if we could leave you with anything, it's the reminder that you are not alone and that what you're feeling is valid and that we see you and that we collaboratively as a community are holding one another up in a way that all human beings deserve when they're struggling in one way or another. So just be kind.
So simple and so hard sometimes, Gabby. Thank you so much. And there is a link up there for Gabby's website now that's live. If you click on that, it takes you right to her website. And it's just if you scroll back a little bit, it's there. It's in blue with her email underneath there. And then thank you all so much for being here. These events, I really try to keep these at no cost to people attending. And it's through the generosity of those who can make a donation that this is possible. And so I did put up the link for the place on the foundation website where people could donate. That is really our goal. it's getting harder and harder to do that, but it makes these spaces available for the most amount of people possible. So Gabby, thank you always for all of your kindness and your wisdom. I look so forward to spending a couple of days with you in Stockton next month. And as Gabby was saying, like we have this thing, we talk a lot in our training in prisons about how we hold two opposites sometimes, where you're at the bedside with somebody who you love so much and you don't necessarily want them to die, but you also could see their suffering and it's time for them to go. And we joke about how much we who are not in prison cannot wait to get into the prison, and how much all the people we work with inside cannot wait to get out. But in the in between spaces, in the liminal spaces, we do wonderful work together. So thank you all for being here. Barbara Carnes is going to be with us. We were scheduling her for the 15th, but I think we're going to have to push that back a little bit. Everybody that was here today will get an email from our MailChimp announcement about that. She was originally scheduled for the 15th, but we just haven't been able to connect with her person about getting the stuff up online. So I think we'll push that back a little bit later in April or in May, but I look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you so much for your time. And Gabby, any time we spend together is just wonderful time. Thank you so much. And I'm going to stop the recording now. There'll be a little bit of a moment where it says the recording is stopped, and then I can stay just for a couple of minutes. Gabby, I don't know if you need to go, but if there's anybody that was too shy to say something in the bigger room, you have an opportunity to do that. So thank you so much. Until next time, on behalf of the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation, we thank you all.